Penguin Random House Audio presents Lower Than the Angels, A History of Sex and Christianity, written and read for you by Diarmaid Macculloch. Note to listeners, this audiobook contains photographs and works of art to accompany the material.
For Alex, Ben, and Max, in memory of Felicity and Alice. Acknowledgements. Hardly had my reading for this book begun in 2020 when the world was plunged into lockdown. It was a particular pleasure in those peculiar conditions to enjoy the virtual or carefully regulated face-to-face company of my colleagues and friends at Campion Hall, Oxford, who in my retirement from the Oxford Theology and Religion faculty had generously elected me to a fellowship at the Hall, complete with study space. Their hospitality afforded pleasant hours contemplating angels proudly bearing rifles in the delightful collection of Cusco art donated to the Hall by Professor Peter Davidson. I extend my thanks to all at Campion for their welcome and conversation, alongside my continuing happy association with St. Cross College over 3 decades, now as Emeritus Fellow. Although I take full responsibility for both the reading and research I've done and for the conclusions I've drawn, I was very lucky to have expert and enthusiastic assistance from Dr. Anna Chrysostomides and Dr. Rachel Dryden, specialists in Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox Christianity, who drew up bibliographies for me on some of the topics investigated in this book. What an unalloyed pleasure it was to work with them and enjoy their learning and friendship. It was a privilege to discuss this material with them, and they hugely enriched what I've been able to write. I'm deeply grateful to the British Academy Small Grants Fund, supported by the Leverhulme Trust, for providing funding for that research assistance. I'm also grateful to friends and colleagues for fruitful conversations and advice, of whom these are especially to be thanked, while exempt from blame for remaining faults. Lindsay Allison-Jones, Sarah Apatry, Nick Austin, Matthew Bayman Qureshi, John Blair, Avril Cameron, Sarah Caro, Martin Carver, Mark Chapman, Sophie Grace Chappell, Sarah Coakley, Katie Cubitt, Brian Cummings, Peter Davidson, B. Groves, Peter Groves, Helena Hamerow, Michael Harazin, Martin Hennig, Judith Herron, David Hilliard, Ronald Hutton, Isidoros Katsos, Jim Keenan, Tim Lavey, Philip Lindholm, Jack Marney, Noel Malcolm, Rachel Raphael Neese, Nicholas Orme, Aristotle Papanikolaou, David Parker, Ken Parker, John Payton, Glyn Redworth, Melise Riven, Alison Salverson, Josephine Seckham, Gemma Simmons, Michael Snape, Guy Stroomser, Susan Walker, Robin Ward, William White, Christopher Woods, and Simon Yarrow. In addition, Sam Badley, John Barton, John Blair, Katie Cubitt, Sue Gillingham, Paula Gooder, Helen King, and Judith Maltby kindly read all or part of my text and made invaluable suggestions. I learned much from the late John Boswell and the late Alan Bray, brave and pioneering scholars whom I would dearly love to have known longer. As ever, I'm hugely grateful to the support provided even for retired university staff by the Oxford Library System and its heroic staff members from Bodley's librarian onwards. What a luxury it is to enjoy this association. All through my 3 decades in Oxford, I've also luxuriated in the range of our graduate seminars and the welcome I received into their specialist deliberations. I co-edited the Journal of Ecclesiastical History for 2 decades from 1995. That journal, leader in its field worldwide, publishes around 300 book reviews a year, commissioned by the editors from experts across the entire range of church history. A superb resource of up-to-date discussion, which I found a sure guide in formulating the structure of my historical narratives. The present editorial team continues to be a source of friendship, fun, and wisdom. Likewise, my fellow judges of the Wolfson Prize and our admirable support team have prompted both enjoyable discussions and a constant reminder to spread my sights across the whole field of historical publication beyond my own arbitrary interests. At Penguin Press, Stuart Proffitt's warm encouragement, expert editing, and constant interest in the enterprise have remained essential to its completion, together with many Penguin colleagues, notably Richard Dogood. Cecilia Mackay has brought her usual energy and skill to enrich my choice of illustrations. At an early stage in my preparation of this book came the death of my long-standing literary agent, Felicity Bryan. So much more than an agent, as friend, motivator, and inspiration. Her zest for life in general, and for the writing and publishing of books in particular, will remain in the affectionate memory of all who knew her. This book itself owes much to her encouragement and spirited championship of my proposal. And it is a privilege to dedicate this book to her memory and for those who love her. Her colleague and successor, Catherine Clarke, has been a continuing source of support and friendship, and I'm delighted by the continuing benevolent part that the fine folk at Felicity Bryan Associates play in my enterprises. Finally, those who have taught me what little I understand about human relationships will know who they are and why they deserve my gratitude. From St. Cross College and Campion Hall, Oxford, February 2024. Conventions used in the text. In a work regarding the Christian faith, a first concern must be the most appropriate way to address the God, who is the common object of worship for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. In the past, like many modern Christian historians and biblical scholars, I had been in the habit of using the form Yahweh to refer to God in a pre-Christian Judaistic context. So did a widely influential Roman Catholic English translation of the Bible, the Jerusalem Bible, until revised in 2019. This is potentially offensive to Jews, who for more than 2 millennia have refrained from pronouncing the divine name Yahweh, to the extent that we don't really know how the name was pronounced before the ban on saying it arose. This is because Hebrew script originally registered only consonants. The addition of small dots and dashes to ensure that the traditional pronunciation of Hebrew was not lost came in only well into the Common Era, long after the ban was in place. The conjectural pronunciation Yahweh rests on evidence in sources in Greek. Moreover, to use the Yahweh form suggests that there is a difference between the God of the Hebrews and the God of Christians, a notion that mainstream Christianity vigorously rejected in the 2nd century CE. For similar reasons, it's judicious in a work of history such as this not to distinguish God in discussions of Islam by the use of his name in Arabic, Allah, since the Quran makes a clear affirmation that God, as proclaimed by the Prophet Muhammad, is the same God as that of the Hebrews and of Christians. Listeners should note that for reasons of historical accuracy, I follow a recent trend in scholarship that translates the ancient Greek and Latin terms Judeos and Judeus as Judean, not Jew, when I refer to the long period of antiquity during which this description denoted not so much a religious identity as an ethnicity among the various ethnicities of the ancient world. The ethnicity included its own distinctive religious practice, and for some centuries, a political existence in territories of Israel and Judah or Judea. That period ended with the Romans' defeat of rebellions in Judea during the 2nd century CE, resulting in a major reconstruction of Judaistic tradition at that time, as well as accelerating dispersion of Judean people from the historic lands. I will speak of Jews and Jewishness first when talking about the various dispersed communities beyond Judah and Israel that were created by successive dispersals and exiles from the 6th century BCE. From the 2nd century CE, Jews and Jewishness became a primarily religious identity without a territorial homeland.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?